We're still at halftime. Welcome to the locker room. We're just past the halfway point of 2023, which is crazy to think about. But halftime in sports, as it's going to be for us for the next couple of weeks, it's an opportunity, it's a great opportunity to pause, to get off the playing surface of life and faith and ask an important question. Is your faith ready for when the whistle blows and the third quarter begins? Like, is your faith ready for the next half? Maybe it's the next half of this year. Maybe it's, the next leg of your faith journey. Maybe you're new to faith, and it's the first leg of your faith journey. Is your faith ready? Maybe it's the second half of high school that you need to get ready for. Maybe it's the second half of this marriage that you're going to need faith. Maybe it's the second half of this season, whatever this season is for you. Maybe it's the second half of retirement. And the question I have as you look out at that season, is your faith ready? Is your faith ready for that next season? And if you don't feel like you're ready, and that's okay, because I'll just be level with you, I don't feel ready for what's next. I really don't. But it's good that we're talking about it. Why? So we can get ready. But because if you're not ready, if you don't feel like you're ready, then this is a great time, this series over the next couple of weeks, a great time for us to talk about what do we need to do to get ready. And what we need to do at halftime, what you need to do at halftime as you're looking at your next half, you need to make an adjustment. You need to make an adjustment. I need to make an adjustment. And that's what we're doing in this series. We are going to be looking at a different parable of Jesus, and we're going to look at the parables of Jesus, which are stories Jesus told that reveal and concealed truth about life and faith. As we're looking at the parables of Jesus, we're going to listen for his coaching. And then what are we going to do? We are going to make the adjustment. We are going to make the adjustment because we want to make it to the end of the half, right? We are going to make the adjustment. And last week we talked about the first adjustment. And this might be the most important adjustment because if you don't make this adjustment, I don't know if all the other adjustments fall in line. But the first adjustment is give God the ground of your heart. What does that mean? That means whenever God says something, whenever he shows you something, whenever you see, okay, that's the way of Jesus, that's his word, then let it plant in your heart, Trust it. That's the first adjustment. Okay, God, for the next half, whatever you say, I'm going to trust. And I'm going to trust it on the deepest level of my heart. Now, Kerry Newhoff, who is an author, he has a major leadership podcast, and he started a church, and he's a pastor, but he's kind of stepped away from that recently. But he wrote a book called At Your Best. And the reason why he wrote this book, as he explains, is it's his attempt to share his adjustments to leaders after he burned out. And that's what he's doing. After he burned out in life, after he burned out maybe in a quarter of his life, after he burned out in ministry and in leadership. And here's sort of what he says about people based on research. He said, most people are overwhelmed, overworked, and overcommitted. It's true. In fact, many surveys would say about half of Americans, probably more, are either on the edge of burnout or they are burned out. They're on empty. They're tired. And then on top of that, this is so true, on top of that, there are the difficulties. Your unique difficulties might be different than mine, but whatever's kind of you're dealing with, you're having to navigate that on the edge of burnout. And then there is this idea that we come into contact almost every day. It's the dark outlook, right? Almost everywhere you look, or when you put something in your ears and you turn it on, or any conversation you have, it's likely to go into the direction of this world isn't going in a good direction, right? Look at this problem. Look at that problem. Look at what they're doing. Look at what they're calling good. Look at what they're saying is okay. Look at the economy. Look at whatever. So we're on the edge of burnout. We have our own difficulties, and then it just seems like, well, everything else around me is crumbling, and then finally you're depleted. That's where a lot of us are at halftime. If we were just to get really honest. And if I were to get really honest, I would say, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. It's true. And my question for you is, what happens if this doesn't get addressed? If this continues to be your norm? What happens to your faith? What happens to you? What happens to your joy? What happens to your dream of, your happily ever after and the people most important to you? I mean, level with me. Are you nervous about the next half because of the emotional and spiritual depletion of your, emotional and spiritual tank? And this is the challenge that many of us are going to be facing. So are you in danger of faith burnout? You've seen it. You've watched it happen in other people's life. Likely it's happened to you. And you know what I'm talking about. Where you were good with the Lord, habits were good, and then it just over time burned out, and it just became not a priority, or something else took focus or whatever. And you came back, and now here you are again. And it's like, you feel it. You're overwhelmed, you're overworked, you're overcommitted. There's a dark outlook on life, and you're depleted. Are you in danger? Because, listen, this is true. Maybe this helps you. This helped me. All of us get tired. I'm not asking you if you're tired. Yes, you are, okay? I know you are. You're tired. Here's what I'm asking. What do you do when you don't get untired? How do we navigate this? When you do things and you're not getting untired, that's more like burnout. And you might be burning out if you have trouble sleeping. You might be burning out if it's a challenge for you to start a new day. You might be burning out if you're always wishing you were somewhere other than you currently are with whoever you're currently with. You might be burning out if you're self-medicating with some sort of substance or some sort of habit. You might be burning out if you've become more easily irritated than maybe you used to be. You might be burning out if you're having trouble concentrating. You used to be able to be locked in, and now it's harder. You might be burning out if your motivation for taking the day, and being who you're called to be is just not as high. When regular tasks are becoming hard. You might be burning out if you're withdrawing from people and real conversation and church. You might be burning out if your joy is low. And this isn't like depression, okay? Depression is a different sort of thing than burnout. We're talking about a loss of energy that's fueling depression. That's what we're talking about. So what are we going to do to endure the next half? Because a lot of us are about to go into it almost burned out. How are we going to get to 0-0 in the fourth quarter with that kind of energy level, with the result that we want? Most of Matthew chapter 24 is Jesus preparing his disciples how to endure, specifically how to endure the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, which took place in 70 AD. Rome came in. It was this horrific experience. It was predicted in the Old Testament, and Jesus predicted it himself. But basically, in that whole chapter, he's helping them to prepare for that half of their life, which was going to be the end half of their life. See, Jesus did not want his followers then, and he does not want his followers now to burn out with the challenges that are coming ahead. And so Jesus says the statement, he says, hey, the temple is going to be destroyed. It's going to be chaotic. There's going to be a lot of suffering. There's going to be persecution. And I want you to endure to the end. And his disciples ask a couple of questions. They basically say, okay, Jesus, when will that be? Because there's something that helps us feel better about the challenge when we know when the challenge is over, when it's kind of something we can put our hands on and know that's not forever. Okay, this is going to come to an end. So they ask him, hey, when is that temple destruction thing going to be? And then when is like the end going to be? Those are the couple of questions that they ask him. And Jesus gives all this vivid detail and practical advice and, signs of the times about how they can endure to the end, to the judgment of God on Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple and all of that. And it's all throughout Matthew 24. And then he shifts to answer their second question, which is, how do we endure to the end? When you come back and everything is set right and all of this is rolled up like a scroll and all the things of this life have been transformed forever, the end, the judgment, all of that kind of stuff. And he starts to shift from specifics, which frustrates us, but it's for a reason. He actually shares a vision, a picture, and a question. In the form of a question. And here's what it is. Matthew 24, 44 through 45. He says, so you must also be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. And here's the question and the vision. Who then is a faithful and wise servant when the clock hits 00 on your life or on all of life? Who then didn't burn out? Who is a faithful and wise servant? And so what does Jesus do after he gives us this vision? He tells 3 parables in Matthew 25, and we're going to cover each of these parables in this series. These are the last 3 parables Jesus tells, which is probably pretty important. And so in the first one, and like the other ones, what is he going to be doing? He's going to be teaching an adjustment so that we can become followers of Jesus who are ready and who can endure all of life throughout the rest of our life, through the next half. And the first parable is the parable of the 10 bridesmaids. And so as we read this parable, I want you to listen. What is the adjustment that Jesus is asking me to make in the next half? Matthew 25, verse 1 says, the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 bridesmaids who took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, and 5 were wise. So Jesus is saying the kingdom of heaven, when all this is over, those who endure and those who receive that, it's going to be just like this story I'm telling, just like this wedding story. Now, first century Palestinian weddings went like this. There was a wedding that took place at the bride's home. It was a big celebration. And then there was a parade that went from the bride's house to the groom's house or his family's estate, and they would have a huge banquet and they would party into the night, okay? And that's what they would do. They would be lengthy, there was no rush, there was no schedules, these were important events, and the goal was to enjoy every aspect of it. Now, the bridesmaids, they had an important job. Their job was, when the wedding ended, they had to go ahead of the wedding party, which was parading and touring through town. This could have been a long distance across town, on foot, and they had to go to the groom's house to prepare and wait for the arrival of the wedding party, and specifically the groom and the new wife. And this could take a long time, often into the night, And the 10 bridesmaids go do their job in Jesus' story. They each have lamps so they can have light to guide their path and to do the things that they need to do when he arrives. And so they each have lamps, and we learn from Jesus that half of them were wise about this job, and the other half were not wise. So let's continue the story. Verse 3. The 5 who were foolish didn't take enough olive oil for their lamps, which was its fuel source. But the other 5 were wise enough to take along extra oil. When the bridegroom was delayed, so it took longer than they had calculated, they all became drowsy. Both the wise and the foolish got tired and fell asleep. At midnight, they were roused by the shout, "Look, the bridegroom is coming. Come out and meet him." All the bridesmaids got up and prepared their lamps. Then the 5 foolish ones asked the others, "Please give us some of your oil, because our lamps are going out." But the others replied, "We don't have enough for all of us. Go to the shop, buy some for yourselves." But while they were gone to buy oil, the bridegroom came. Then those who were ready went in with him to the marriage feast, which this is all symbolic of Jesus returning and the feast that believers are to have at the end. So when the bridegroom came, those who were ready went with him to the marriage feast, and the door was locked. Later, when the other 5 bridesmaids returned, they stood outside calling, "Lord, Lord, open the door for us." But he called back, "Believe me, I don't know you. So you too must keep watch, for you do not know the day or the hour of my return." What are we to take from this parable today? What we learn is a difference between wise followers and unwise followers. That's the comparison that Jesus wants to draw our attention to. What we learn is there's a difference between those who are ready and those who are not ready. And the difference isn't tiredness. Wise people get tired. Foolish people get tired. Followers of Jesus get tired. Not followers of Jesus get. It doesn't matter. That's not what the difference is. Everyone became drowsy. The difference is, and listen to this, okay? The difference is the wise prepared for when they would be tired. That's the difference. That's the difference. The foolish ones didn't prepare. They ran out of oil because their lamps burned through the night, and they didn't bring any extra. And the wise ones planned for that potentially happening, and they brought extra oil so that they could use their lamps when they needed to and didn't have to go out and buy any when it was too late. Are you prepared for getting tired? See, I'm not going to lie to you. You're not going to all of a sudden have superhuman energy in the next half. You're going to get tired. The point Jesus is trying to make is what he tells us about the wise bridesmaids in verse 4. But the other 5, this could be you. The other 5 were wise enough to take along extra oil. That's the adjustment. This is the adjustment. Because if your lamp's going to be burning and you don't know how long it's going to be burning for, it could take a while, you're going to get tired. What you don't want is to run out of the fuel that you need, right? And so the adjustment is be wise enough, as you're looking out at the next half, be wise enough to prepare for the potential of burnout. Be wise enough. And I love this phrase in the text because you don't have to be perfect enough. You don't have to be the most wise. You don't have to be the most knowledgeable person in the world. You don't have to be the most, prepared. It just says, be wise enough. Just wise enough. That's all you need. You just need to be wise enough as you go about the next half. And so we need to ask this question, hey, what is wise enough? How can we become wise enough to prepare for the potential of faith burnout in the next half? Well, there's 3 areas that I'm just going to urge you, that I see from this text, that you need to prepare wisely for, so that you can endure and you can be ready at the end of the game, at the end of life, with a strong faith. And the 3 areas are time management, energy management, and decision management. Those are the 3 areas we see with the 10 bridesmaids. Now listen to me again. You don't have to be perfect in these areas. You're not earning your salvation. What are you doing? You're trying to remain faithful to what Jesus has done for you. And so what you need is to be just wise enough. And the first preparation, as we're here at halftime, as you look at the next half, you need to perceive your time. You need to perceive your time. You need to perceive your time. Now, in 1993, the NCAA national championship game of college basketball took place between Michigan and North Carolina. Okay, and it was a close game all the way to the wire. 20 seconds left. Chris Webber takes the inbound, dribbles down to the corner, gets boxed in by the opponent, and after about 10 seconds go by, he makes one of the all-time worst blunders at the end of a game. He calls a timeout. Now, normally, this would be a good strategy so you can get reset, get the right shot, have a chance to win. The problem was they didn't have any more timeouts. And what that meant was a technical foul. And so North Carolina then shot free throws, which sealed the game. And they lost. And the point I want to make here is you have to perceive your time. If you want to finish down the stretch, if you want to be ready in the end, you have to manage your time well. Psalm 90, verse 2 and 4 says, before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the whole world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. You turn people back to dust, saying, return to dust, you mortals. 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that has just gone by, or like a watch in the night. I love this passage because it reminds us a couple of things. It reminds us that God, the creator of time, is immortal. He's infinite. He has unlimited time. He's outside of time. He created your time. And it also reminds us that you and I are mortal as we look at his immortality. And what does that mean? Here's what it means. Time is not unlimited. Time is not unlimited. Eventually, the clock hits 0, 0, 0 in our life. And eventually, the clock will hit 0, 0, 0 in all of life. So at halftime, it's important to know we still have time to make adjustments. We still have time to get it right, but that time isn't forever. We have to perceive our time. How do we do that? Psalm 90, verse 12 says, teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. What's this saying? Basically, God, since you are infinite and I am not, teach me to count. Because the time I have is limited and I need to manage it well. I need to use it well if I want to endure. So how much time do we have? How much time do we have? You need to know that. On average, if you have a really good life, it's about 79 years. And that's a good estimate. Or 28,835 days. That's how much time you have from birth. And so think about where you're at now, you know? And let me just do this for a second, okay? I would like to show you what I'm talking about here. So if you have that many hours and that many years, you're going to use it. You're going to use it on some things. Now, depending on how you feel about this, about a third of your life, that might have been just a little bit more, is sleeping. And the marbles just woke some of you up. It was awesome. But that's a third of your life, which could discourage you and go, oh my goodness, you know, a third of my life I'm resting. Or it reminds you of what you need. You were designed for that. So about a third of your life, 8 hours a day, that's what you're doing. The next big chunk of your life is spent working. Your job, whatever it is. And so we start to understand that, our Monday through Friday takes a big chunk of our life. And so what job we're doing, how we're doing it, all that, it really affects things. It really affects things. Another big area of life, and this will, I hope it hits you, is we spend a significant amount of time on screens. You want to know how much? How much time does the average person spend on screens? Well, if you spend about 33 years in bed, or something like that, 35 years in bed, the average person spends about 13 years of their life working, and we spend about 11 years on screens. 8 hours TV, 3 years social media type stuff, looking at a phone. That's a lot. That's a big chunk. And then, there's some other things we can do with our time. We can eat with people. That takes time. We can go on a holiday vacation or, a vacation with our family. A little bit of time for romance, relationships, cultivating those things. Exercise, 1 marble for that. And school will give you another marble. And then the rest of life. We need to learn to perceive our time. we need to learn to perceive our time. One thing you could do is realize that if you have one of those phones, which all of us do, that on average, we unlock our phone or we touch our phone. We unlock our phone, we look down at our phone 150 times a day on average. We swipe or click our phone 2,600 plus times a day. There's more times of touching your phone than there are minutes in the day. And I like what Levi Lesko says. What if instead you looked up 150 times a day for even a few seconds? What if you learned to do what the psalmist is teaching us? You learn to perceive your time by looking up. What if you were wise enough in the next half to perceive your time? You know that time is not unlimited, and you're looking up constantly to the giver of time, to the only infinite one, asking him, how should I use this so that I don't burn out? So that I don't burn out following you, so that I don't burn out and my family has to deal with that. How should I use this? What would that do for you in the next half if you looked up and said, how do you want me to use what you've given me? The second way we can prepare, the second area we need to prepare wisely to prevent faith burnout in the next half is you need to plan for energy loss or bring extra oil. You need to plan for this. I recently read Toyota Motor Corporation has announced that it has developed a electric car battery for its electric cars that could go a range of 700 miles, which is like almost double what people are doing right now. And the best news is that if this all works out and they figure it out in a couple of years, you can get to that charge on a 10-minute charge time. Now, if that happened, that would be a game changer in the electric automotive industry because those are the problems right now, range and charge time. And so if they were able to do this, man, that would really allow this to take off. What's interesting to me as I think about that, that's what we'd like for our body and soul right now. See, most of us are living beyond our current specs. We're imagining we're rated for 700 miles and a 10-minute charge time, but we're not. We're imagining, you know what my faith needs? Just a 1-hour charge bi-monthly. That will get me through the next half. That will keep me on fire for Jesus. That will build fruit in my soul. That'll make me a better husband, and it won't. But we think it does. And it's not correct. Burnout is when outputs exceed the inputs. And over and over and over, so many of us are wondering why we are tired, why we are overwhelmed, why our faith tank is depleted. And it's because we are not charging, we are not refueling like we need to according to our specs. The reality is, you are human. You are a mortal person, and you will get tired, and you need rest and more. I like what Ephesians says in chapter 5. It says, "This is why it is said, 'Wake up, sleeper. Rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. Do not get drunk on wine, which leads to debauchery. Instead, be filled with the Spirit, speaking to one another with psalms, hymns, and songs of the Spirit. Sing and make music from your heart to the Lord, always giving thanks to God the Father for everything in the name of our Lord Jesus." And he tells us this. Paul's writing this to the Ephesian church because he wants to encourage them. Be very careful what you turn to for replenishing your tank. Be wise with that. Be calculated about that, because everything you do takes energy. Every opportunity takes energy. And so many of us, sometimes me, we are putting energy on foolish things that we think will be a healthy input to our soul, but actually it's another drain. Everyone needs to know the answers to these three questions. What is my capacity? What am I able to do until I run on empty? In a day, in a week, in a season, in a long stretch. And you need to know it. When do I normally get tired? When do I normally start reaching for, the wine cellar? Like, where are those things? Where's my capacity? When am I getting tired and now I'm trying to get untired? And then you need to know what drains you. What drains you? What unhealthy or just not effective inputs or behaviors are you reaching for to fill you? For some of us, it's a bad habit. For others of us, it's a real substance thing. It's not taking the edge off. It's trying to get you untired, but it doesn't work, does it? It just makes you want more and more and more and more. And it could turn into an addiction, which is another problem you'd have to deal with. So there's all these inputs that we're some of us are in toxic situations. We're around toxic people that maybe we should distance ourselves from or set some boundaries from. Some of us, it's our phone. I mean, if you just did the one thing of, you know what, I'm going to schedule my phone time for 30 minutes a day, which some of you are like, I couldn't do that. And I'm just like, well, are you tired? Like if we just put the phone down, that would change so many things. It's not going to give you what you want, so stop going to it. We need to understand what charges us. What charges us. If you are spiritually burned out, okay, then you need a spiritual input. That's what you need. What is that? A spiritual input is anything that reminds you of God's great saving and redemptive work in your life. And you can trust Him. Anything that reminds you of that, anything that causes you to worship that, anything that causes you to recenter on who God is, on who He says you are, and what He promises for you. Anything that makes you think of the cross and God's great love despite our great sin, and that is enough. And we need to be reminded over and over. So for you, and I know for me, one of the big ones is music. You'll see me I'm over here worshiping. Why? Because it's a spiritual input. And so if you need to worship, when you come into this place, put your hands in the air, sing as loud as you can. Who cares what the other person thinks next to you? Maybe for you, you just need to insert an hour of worship music during your week, because when you sing the songs of God, it fills you up. It changes your heart. It makes you less tired. What are some other inputs? Maybe it's prayer time. You just need to discipline yourself to pray to your Heavenly Father, because every time you get up from prayer, what are you? You're refreshed, you're replenished, you're trusting God with what you were trusting yourself with, and now you are inputting this. Maybe for you, it's being outdoors. You connect with God in nature, but you're bottled up in an office. What can you do? Make time to get outside, to take in creation. Maybe for you, it's I need to be around people. You're an extrovert. Well, then church is kind of a must-have for you, and all of us, but more for you. Because you need community. You need people to talk to. You need to know that you're not alone, and there's energy, and you get energy from people. Sometimes it's serving. Some of us are wired to be filled up by helping others or using our talents to help others in a God-honoring way. You got to know what your spiritual inputs, things that remind you of who Jesus is, what He's done, and recenter your life. So what charges you spiritually? And is it enough? Are you getting enough of those inputs to compete with the drains? What is your extra oil that you're going to pack with you? Because you know you're going to need it in the next half. And what you need to do then, and the way it plays out in our life, is you need to put it in your calendar. I'm going to be, influenced or input this into my life daily, weekly, regularly, strategically. I'm going to do it when I start to feel empty, because I know this is going to fill me up. What are your inputs? See, God built strategic inputs for His people in the Old Testament. And when they stopped honoring it, what happened? Their faith burned out. What were those two inputs that God gave them to govern them and to be rhythm for them? The first one was Sabbath. And that was to be a weekly thing where they take a step back from controlling everything around them, and they gather in community, and they eat food they prepared the night before, and they focus on people and relationships and trusting God. And then God gave them festivals of worship, which were sort of these extended periods that happened through the seasons where they had longer times of not working, not hustling, not being overwhelmed, and getting replenished with spiritual inputs. Listen, you might have a vacation plan this summer. You might have come back already. Listen, you will not come back refreshed. How do I know that? If there's no spiritual inputs, you will not be spiritually full. Likely, on your vacation, you partied a little harder, you drank a little more, you ate worse, you slept poorly, maybe you reconnected with some relationships, and that's good. But if you're looking for a replenishment for your soul, it's not vacation. It's spiritual inputs. Finally, the third area that, again, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be wise enough, is to discern your decisions. And we're going to call this learn to trim your wick. Learn to trim your wick. When the bridesmaids awoke at midnight, each of them, the wise and the foolish, trimmed their wick. Why? Because the longer the wick, the more the oil burn. The shorter the wick, the more they can better use and conserve the oil. When the foolish ones trimmed their wick, they didn't have any more fuel. But the wise ones had more, and they kept trimming their wick so they could serve it as long as possible. It could be that you feel okay with time management, that you feel like you're putting regular spiritual inputs, but what you're not doing is you're not trimming the wick. You're not conserving and being selective about what you need to do. There was a guy in the 1400s, late 1400s, his name was Benedict. You may have heard of him. He was famous for creating a rule of life. And this rule of life was for him so he could endure through the faith, but people were flocking to him as he was reforming monasteries. People's faith was burning out. They were centering their lives on other things, and they were coming to him, let's try his way of life because he seems to be flourishing. Now, Benedict's rule of life had some required rules. So in other words, if you were going to come run with him or be in one of his monasteries, which were growing rapidly in the late 5th century, if you were going to run with him, there was some rules about how much you could have material so you wouldn't get greedy in your heart. There was literally rule. You couldn't be in his community if you were about accumulation because it would ruin you. There was a rule that you had to have 5 hours every day of productive labor. You had to do something productive like farming or building or creating. Like you had to do something productive. And then he said, if you're going to be in my place, you're going to have 2 hours of private reading. You're going to have several periods of daily prayer. You're going to also, part of your day is going to be about helping other people, charitable works. And there were several other, sayings that you would live by. But I say this to say, not that, this is the magic bullet, but I say this to say, like Benedict and like those people, we get off the tracks, we start to burn out, and we have to be consistent and selective on doing the things, deciding to do the things, discerning the best things that will strengthen our faith and bring us joy. Paul says it like this in the end of his 1 Thessalonians letter. Hold on to what is good, reject every kind of evil. That's what you need to do with your day. You need to hold on to what is good and reject every kind of evil. And see, we want it both ways. You just don't have the capacity. So as you look at your next half, I have 3 questions for you. And this is so your faith doesn't burn out. What do you need to continue? It's life-giving to you. It's fueling you. It's growing your faith. Maybe it's a prayer time. Maybe it's a life group. Maybe it's time you're spending in nature and that's just doing something in your soul. Maybe it's a routine that's just working for you. What do you need to continue to do, to decide to do, so your faith doesn't burn out? What do you need to stop? It's draining you. Maybe it's too much work. Maybe you're skipping church a lot. Maybe you have a bad habit that you're fostering and not really dealing with. Maybe there's a wrong fuel source that you just keep going to. What do you need to stop? And then what do you need to start? What do you need to start? Maybe you need to start a prayer time. Maybe you need to start reading the Bible on the regular. Maybe you need to meditate so you can actually hear your thoughts and feelings and they don't blow up in your next conversation with your spouse. Things that we're, maybe too good to do. But there's reasons why people do these things. Maybe you need to serve somewhere. Because when you serve, it's fueling you. Maybe you need to, take a Sabbath. Figure out what Sabbath looks like for your family. What do you need to do? What do you need to start? And then be specific. This is what I'm going to do. I mean, write that down right now if you're taking notes. What do I need to do? Be clear. This is how I'm going to do it. And then finally, be stingy. Don't let others try to take it from you. The foolish bridesmaids tried to take the extra oil. You can't have this. Be stingy. Now, in the movie about the 1980 hockey team, the U.S. hockey team that defeated the mighty Soviet Union called Miracle, you may have seen it. There's a really exciting pregame speech because the U.S. hockey team was like nothing compared to the great, Soviet Union of those days. And the coach walks into the locker room and it's all tense, and you could tell the players aren't sure they're going to win this game, and here they are, and it's a miracle and all of that. And here's what the coach says. Great moments are born from great opportunity. And that's what you have here tonight, boys. That's what you've earned here tonight. One game, if we played them 10 times, they might win 9. But not this game. Not tonight. Tonight we skate with them. Tonight we stay with them. And we shut them down because we can. Tonight we are the greatest hockey team in the world. You were born to be hockey players, every single one of you, and you were meant to be here tonight. This is your time. Their time is done. It's over. I'm sick and tired of hearing about what a great hockey team the Soviets have. This is your time. Now go out there and take it. And they run out of the locker room all charged up, and they win. Amazing. Let me just say this. The next half is your opportunity. Now you might look out and think that it's going to be too tough. It will be hard. You might look out and you're going to face challenges and ups and downs. Let me just remind you, you were born for this. With God by your side, you can be wise each day with your time and energy and decisions. Because, remember, wise enough is enough to not burn out. You don't have to be the most wise. You just have to be wise enough. What is wise enough? You're prepared. You're prepared because you perceive time. You know how much you have, and you're going to use it wisely. What is wise enough? You have regular spiritual inputs of energy, and you're planning them and you're scheduling them because you know you're going to burn out. You're going to run out of energy. And you have developed top-notch discernment. You know how to use your time. You know how to use your energy for the activities that matter most. And listen, no one else is going to manage these areas in your life but you. You alone will control this. And if you do this right, if you're wise enough, when your life hits 0, 0, 0, 0, your faith will be ready because you made an adjustment and you were wise enough to prepare. You can manage your time. You can manage your energy. You can make good decisions. But let me just say this. If you haven't made the decision to put your faith and trust in Jesus, none of what I said today will matter. Because you don't earn that. See, a lot of times we're fighting for a good half, but we have to understand we've already won. And that's what refuels us. And so if you haven't put your trust in Jesus as your Lord and your personal Savior and looked at what He's endured on your behalf, if you want to receive Him today, if you want to say, you know what, I know in the next half, time's great, energy's great, decisions, I could do all that, but if I don't make a decision to say, I'm going to follow Jesus, I just want to help you do that today. So if you want to make that decision, you can go back to the 103. We'd love to talk with you and pray with you today. Let's pray together right now. God, thank you so much for the gift of time, the gift of energy, and the ability that you've given us through your word, through your coaching, to discern the adjustments we need to make. God, we just ask that you fill us up. Help us know what we need to start. Help us know what we need to stop. Help us know what we need to continue. You are our energy. Make us ready for you. Make us ready for you for when our life is over, when all of life is over. We want to finish well. We want to be wise enough. Help us to do that. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Hey, would you stand with me?